Good evening, everyone. This is IMG Research Academy, now Global Research Initiative. We're a collection of people, mostly physicians from all over the world, who come together to figure out how we can demystify and understand clinical research for the purpose of providing evidence-based care to our patient population. Many of us are US and in Canada. Understanding and knowing research also helps you to also grow your career trajectory. So it's like a dual thing. Get to know research and then serve a patient population and eventually also grow your career pathway. We've been doing this since 2019. We have tons of videos in our YouTube channel where we teach one area of research or another. Every Sunday we meet and then we'll pick just one area, just one focus area, and then make sure that everybody understands it in detail and then we'll move to the next. We believe that if you have been following us for 2 years, cumulatively, our videos would have at least made you competent enough to do your thing. We go beyond just numbers and figures and values to how, the practicality of how you can do them. My name is Dr. Kobe Edwards. I'm a family medicine resident. Today, we have a guest who is an oncologist in training. Dr. Tobechukwu Kobe happens to be my brother also. So it's someone that I have known for a very long time. He is in the research space also, not just only in the research space, not just only in the clinical space. He's done tons of research works from case reports to prospective studies. He's been in the field, hands-on, collecting data during COVID period, collecting real samples and data. He's been, just name it, everywhere. He's attended lots of conferences. He's represented new and upcoming researchers in ASCO, in different conferences that he's attended. So he comes with a wealth of knowledge on what research is, what research is not. Today, we don't have any topic at all in our head. We just want to chit chat. And just like last week, what we did was to say, okay, how do I even conceptualize an idea? How do I get research going? So it's going to be like an open forum, open ground. Like, okay, what do you want to hear about research? What areas of research do you find most difficult? And then we'll begin to break it down. But before then, we usually have our 5 minutes talk on people who are applying for residency, what you can do to optimize your application. And our talks cover both for those in the US, those in Canada, mostly because we're in the US, we have more experience in the US. On the 15th, some folks are going to come to talk about those in Canada um, and their processes. Dr. Toby, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. It's nice to be here. Thank you so much. And you've known me forever. So it's like I've known you for a long
Yeah.
time. It's like forever. So, but
So
yeah, it's great to be here.
great to be here. Um, let's talk about a little bit of era as well, waiting for more people to log in and then we're moving. The US pathway, because it's a challenging path. Which area, if looking back at your journey, you finished, you're done with residency, now you're doing your oncology. What area of this application do you think is usually a nutcracker for people? And so we'll just spend the next 5 minutes while we're buying time. Let's just talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a few years now, but I think looking back, two things I think are very important that um, oftentimes we want to wrap our heads around and we need to wrap our heads around is your personal statement and your letters of recommendation. I think they make the difference, frankly, on who gets called for an interview and who doesn't get called for an interview. But again, yes, your personal statements and your LORs. Um, your personal statement is what tells your story, right? And a lot of times, I think that we should start writing our personal statements from from as soon as possible and not wait till the last minute, right? Because people want to read your story and connect. That's really the first connection they have with you. Yes, they see the application, but the the representation of your person is in the personal statement, right? Because every other thing they see is data pretty much. They see your age, your name, your graduation school, all of that is data. But what adds the person to the data is your personal statement. And that's, if we're able to do a good job there, it really just makes the difference between candidate A and candidate B. But yeah, that's my thought.
One of the sections we're going to have, we've consulted a consultant who's going to come mid-July to talk about personal statements. He's very vast in it. We are also very vast in personal statements, but we just want like another outside person, and then we also learn to grow from there. So we're going to talk about personal statements extensively, like a session dedicated to how to. Everybody's going to come with their writing pad, and then we sit down, and then we'll begin to put our drafts together and talk about personal statements. There's a second area that you mentioned, personal statements and letters of recommendation. One of the challenges that people get is, I don't know anybody that's going to write letter of recommendation. I don't know how many people have that challenge here. If you're here and you have that challenge, you could speak up. It's the pre-session. I don't know who to write it. Should it be written by a US trained physician? Should it be written by, because most of us are foreign trained physicians, should it be written by a foreign trained physician? Does it make a difference? How long is this recommendation letter going to be? Should I blind it? Should I unblind it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear from us. I think we want to make this session interactive because it's for us. Yeah, maybe we should kind of hear from people what their experiences are in terms of the challenges they're having with letters of recommendation, and we could kind of contribute as well.
I'll throw out random names, Dr. Nee or Dr. Olukayode. If you're in that category and you're applying.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Edward.
Good evening.
I'm actually incoming intern.
I know. I know you're not in that category.
So my contribution about what we're discussing right now is that I feel like to me the most important thing as regards to ERAS application has to do with networking, especially for whole grad, and that really helped me. So what I did was that before the application season opened, that was before June, I made what is called Hustle email. When I mean Hustle email, what I did was that I just have my name, I have my photo, like my normal headshot, then little things about me as regards to my name, my AMC, my ECFMG, and things like that. Then I have a kind of short, I attach my resume to that my email, to that my Hustle email, and I started, searching for programs early as much as possible. So I try to look for programs that suit my personality, that I belong to, and I started sending emails as early as possible. Though I sent tons of emails, but just like maybe 2 programs eventually, reach back, and that was how I got that kind of connection. And that is what I will say with regards to that, especially for Hood IMG. I think even though, yes, personal statement is good, letter of recommendation is good, but you need somebody to be able to, you need someone that will help you to bring up your file, or else it's going to be filtered out, no matter how sad your personal statement is or letter of recommendation. But for young grad, we're like, okay, you're still within that age, within that 5-year grad and things like that. You may say, okay, personal statement is good, a letter of recommendation is good, but for grad, I think the most important thing is networking. And I think Dr. Edward has been saying it a lot of time, that we have to, we shouldn't just be inside our cage. We have to get out from our comfort zone and reach out to people. And I think both IMGs, sometimes, I don't know, maybe because some of them, they're a little bit timid. They don't want to go out to reach out to people. But I feel that is the only thing.
I think there's a fear of, one of them is a fear of rejection. people are scared to be rejected, so they don't want to reach out, um, to people, which is some of the things that we do in this forum to say, hey, you don't have to be worried about being rejected. Reach out to the person. Reach out again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
At least
And
as long as you can do it sensibly, right?
And the reason why I'm saying so is because networking opens a lot of doors. Aside from the fact that it's going to let you to get in contact with the program, it can even help you to to have that US clinical experience you are looking for. Because one of the programs that eventually reached out to me, they told me that they can, if it's possible for me to come over to them, to come and do a kind of 2 weeks externship. It would be better, but unfortunately, I didn't go because that was when I got a new job and he didn't give me the opportunity.
Wow.
So, and eventually I matched in that program because they saw something in my resume from that my hustle email. I don't know what they actually look for, what it was inside of my resume that made them to just like me. So they kept on sending me emails so many times that they're expecting me for the externship, but I didn't go. And when the time comes to that program, immediately they granted me an interview invite. So that's what I'm saying, that networking is key. Is key and it's very, very important.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Thank you, everyone, for this pre-session. We're going straight into the scientific session, which is research session. Open question. What area is making you scared or not to do clinical research? Let's get a feedback from you first. What area makes you think clinical research is cumbersome? And then we'll take it from there. Anybody can attempt. So far, we've had groups. We have our consulting category. We have our non-consulting category. And I've led this group for over probably 5 years now. I've seen the ups and downs, the loops and the curves. Some people, no matter how much you drive them, they don't want to write or they're not going to write. They're scared or they don't know what to write or they don't know how to put the words together or they don't even know where to begin from. So if you're here and you have some of that bottleneck, let me know. Some don't even have the time. I think time is also another major factor. So open mic. Dr. Niharika.
Yes, Niharika.
Dr. Noron, Dr. Israel. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess like my biggest problem, it's like once I've figured out the research topic is to figure out the scope of it, like whether to stop at 5 articles or to stop at 10, and I guess feel assured in like the collection of articles I've picked and that I'm not missing anything out in the field that's really important.
So very, very, very important question that you asked. What's the scope? How do I know the limitation? Where should I stop when I'm writing a research article? To answer that question, I want when Dr. Tobechukwu comes back on video, but I want to break it out. I'll throw it to him so he can answer, but I want to break this. The answer to this question lies on what type of research am I going to do? So if I will rephrase this question, what are the different types of research, Dr. Tobechukwu, and who determines to what extent my scope of my objective? How many papers am I going to include in these different types of research?
Yeah.
And where do I even get those papers? And why should I even include a paper in a research? Very basic fundamental things that we need to even talk about.
Yeah, no, Dr. Niharika, I think you raise a good question. What's the scope of what I should be doing? And, so there are different types of research. We've had the sessions multiple times, so kind of just go briefly. Depends on what you're trying to do, right? You could be doing from, the lowest tier, so to speak, in quotation marks, case reports, right? To, randomized clinical trials, meta-analysis. When we were training, it used to be randomized clinical trials. It used to be meta-analysis and then randomized clinical trials. but now it's the other way. It's randomized clinical trials and then meta-analysis in terms of hierarchy of, really of importance, I would say. So again, depending on the kind of research that you're doing, are you writing a simple case report? Are you just trying to document, a case that you're seeing? Is it because it's rare or because the presentation was unique or, whatever it is, the perspective you're trying to pitch, for that case? Or are you doing a randomized trial? Or are you doing a meta-analysis where you're looking at multiple, previous studies, right? To kind of determine the strength of association or correlation or whatever the case is, right? I'm not going into the details here because I know we've had all those sessions, and if we've not, we're certainly going to have sessions where we kind of dive into the different types of trials, right? But ultimately, you determine the scope of what you're going to be doing in that study, right?
Determine that scope.
Yeah, you do. I think I think the point you're alluding to is that I don't have a lot of experience and expertise. So how do I know if I'm including enough? Or how do I know if I'm including more than I should? I recently did a case report and I still haven't submitted it, but I had a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about that area. I kept on writing and writing and writing. And I had somebody review it who said, he thought, there was more than enough information that was included in that case report and we should cut it down, right? Remove this and remove that and remove that, right? So yes, you do need some degree of experience and expertise and knowledge, but that's where you have supports and guidance and reviewer 1 and reviewer 2 and mentorship, right? When you're doing a case or whatever it is you're writing or a review paper or a meta-analysis, you're oftentimes, especially if you're just starting off, writing it in collaboration with somebody who's got some degree of experience. Or even if you're not writing it with that person, you're sending it off to someone who you think has experience in that area to read through. Because there are certain times where, depending on what you're doing, certain papers you need to include. You may include heaven and earth, but you haven't included this one paper that was landmark in that area. And everybody's like, no, you can't submit this without including results from this paper, right? So having a second experienced eye comes in very handy in kind of helping you navigate those basic questions of how much more should I be doing, how less should I be doing. But ultimately, it's you, making that initial determination, and you have to do it so much so to get comfortable doing it, right? You don't have to be scared of doing it. So a mentor recently said, you have to keep flexing that muscle. This whole idea of research is like a skill. It's like driving, right? You have to embrace your fear and continue to flex that muscle. You have to continue to write and continue to have a different eyes look at it. The question you may want to ask is, why do journals have reviewers, right? Why don't they just, why do they send it out to people, to peers to review? It's because, again, you need some eye to take a look, kind of help you with that question of scope. But I want you to get comfortable making that initial determination for the scope of what your paper will look like. And by the time you're having a second eye take a look, a reviewer is taking a look, somebody who's experienced in that field taking a look, they're going to help you kind of navigate what should be included or not. I don't know if I've addressed that specific question, but
yes,
I didn't go into the details of the individual trials or rather studies, because that's kind of out of the scope of the question you're asking. But again,
in addition to what to be said, because it's like a chit chat, kind of session, so we can get everybody grounded on this particular, this little thing. If this is just the only question we take today, that would be great. It's, like he just mentioned, let's start from the basics, which I usually tell people to start the baseline, like case reports, for example. I will use a very practical example of a case that we saw. Rocephin or ceftriaxone seldomly cause liver injuries, right? But we saw a case where we gave Rocephin and the liver enzymes went up. We had to discontinue the Rocephin and the liver enzyme resolved. We felt, It's very rare for Rocephin because Rocephin is safe in terms of its effect on the liver. Even though they've been reported cases, but okay, this is an interesting case. The person is an elderly person, and we decided to write it. So you see, our objective is the safety of Rocephin in elderly people causing liver injury, something like that. And so we came down to, okay, how many papers are we going to introduce? We did not bother ourselves first with the number of papers we want to include into that particular study. We just wrote the study to focus on our arguments. Rocephin probably caused this liver injury. And that was all we wrote. Not a rare finding, one of the findings in support to other findings that we saw. Let me just share that paper. I shared my screen before. Let me share this one. So I don't know if you can see my screen. We were working on this. We've been working on this particular paper. If you can see my screen, just say hello. So very, very simple. We did the abstract. It's 5-year-old female, multiple comorbidities. We did the introduction. You see how our introduction is very short. Somebody could fault it, but we added the basics for the introduction. We the thesis statement. Why we're trying to do it. A little background on what it is. We did the case representation. In the case representation, there was no reference in the case representation. And then in discussion, we started talking about what happened in our patient, what has other people reported, similarly that happened in their patient, right? A retrospective cohort by this person. So we looked at what happened in our patient, what other people have reported, what happened in our patient, what other people reported in a similar case, and what happened in our patient. And then we saw that it was very short. So this case report was so short like this. And, I went to my supervisor and said, hey, this is all we just got. And we're thinking, okay, how do we expand the scope? Okay, why? Why don't we tell people what's the mechanism of action of how Rocephin, if it happens, since it's in quote rare, probably not too rare, but okay, how does it happen? What could be a part of the thing? So we added another paper on how it happened, another paper on another mechanism, another paper on another mechanism. Could there be some possible risk factors that makes this thing happen in Mr. A and not in Mr. B, right? And then we added 3 more papers to bring it to 7 and 8, looking for why Rocephin probably is, or Keftrazole, whatever they call it, probably will cause liver damage, right? Direct liver injury. And that was it. Well, we came to our limit. After all, we came and said, okay, let's stop here because there are so many things that we could have discussed. We could have discussed liver part. What is liver injury? What is not liver injury? But what we did was we just gave little background on what is the liver injury, how does Rocephin cause liver injury, and reports finding. And then we compared what other people have reported to what we saw in our patient. Were there similarities in presentation? Were there no similarities in presentation? And then we, gave our recommendation, leading points, wrote our conclusion in 2 sentences or 3 sentences. This Keftrazole sometimes may cause liver injury in this type of patient, right? At the end of the day, we used 10 papers. You see, setting out, we did not consider the number of papers first. We just consider what is our story outline. What is our story scope? What are we trying to tell? And then when we got to a particular point, we told ourselves, stop. For you as, I will not use baby researcher, for you as a new beginner, just know that there's no perfect research, none. No, even if it's a professor that wrote it, you see loops and gaps in the paper. You would have said, why didn't he discuss this? Why didn't he add this paper? Why didn't they add this paper? Like my brother said, there are some landmark papers that are required in some of your research paper, but you can decide to say, I want to stop here. This is where I want to stop. One of the types of research that is now a little bit different is systematic review or systematic analysis. or meta-analysis. Because in this systematic review type of paper, what it means is that you're trying to use a system to arrive to the number of papers that you want to write. So first you develop your objective or your research question, and then you begin to design a system using a guideline, like PRISMA guideline. There are different types of guidelines. Say, I'm going to include people that are less than 12. First, I'm going to start my source from these sources: PubMed, Cochrane, this, that. Everybody that has liver problem and ceftriaxone problem, I'm going to include them. That becomes a keyword. When you plug it in, it's going to pull a number of papers, maybe 500 or 5,000. The next thing you're going to say, okay, I'm going to do this study only in adults. And you determine the inclusion and exclusion criteria, except you're writing for a purpose, maybe a journal or a conference that have already set out their inclusion and exclusion, or you're doing a project for something, right, for a reason. So by the time you say, okay, less than 12, I'm going to include papers that are written in English. I'll give you a typical examples. Permit me to share my screen again. Let me give you a typical example. Let's say we go to PubMed. Can you see my screen on PubMed?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
let's say we go to PubMed and I want to do a systematic analysis on this same topic, liver injury and ceftriaxone. Nice search. It's going to pull out 77 papers, right? So it's trying to say, hey, include all these, but what is my objective? What are not my objective, what are the other inclusion criteria? I want to include papers that were written 10 years or below, which is something that we usually tell people, recent papers, right? So by the time I include this criteria, 10 years and below, I will have 48 papers left, right? Those papers that I included, I need them to have full text. I don't want it to be abstract, just full text, because I want to get all the information. I just don't want to get my information alone. So I click on full text. It's going to reduce to 35. I want these papers to be not systematic review, because I'm doing a systematic review, right? Or assuming we're doing not a review. Could it be randomized trials? Well, there's nothing on randomized trial. Okay. Let's say, could it be case reports, see all article types? And then I say, okay, case reports. Let's say we're doing a systematic review on case report that reported on liver injury and Rocephin. So let it just be case report, and I click on apply. Fine, good. Remember, I'm still doing within 10 years. So now I have only 20 papers. I'm still going on full text. How many papers do I have? 16 papers. Okay, fine. And I'm probably going to add additional clear apply field, additional field. I want them to be written in English because that's the language I understand, right? I can't translate others. It has to be human subjects, right? Not animal subjects, right? Because they are humans. All right, include both males and females, not only males alone. There's that male and female, all sexes, right? What else? 18 years and above, childbirth to 18, adults, it has to be adults. Okay, so when I plug in this system, I've put in my inclusion criteria and my exclusion criteria. At the end of the day, I'm going to have only 7 papers to review, these papers to review. I now download these papers, and in a very simplistic way, what I'm just going to say is what this person said, what that person said, what this person said, what this person said, what this person said, all the 7 authors, and I'm done. I don't know, Dr. Tobechuk, we want to add to this, because let's just so that we can make it very practical. So these are the different ways. Like what we just did now could be a topic for someone here, for example, liver injury and Rocephin, systematic review. If you truly want to do something by yourself, we've already done half of this job. All you just need is we download this, and then you sit down and begin to use some type of writing technique, and you're using either a comparison writing technique John et al. Compared to this person. This is what this person found. This is what this person reported. Or you want to use an analytic writing technique, or you want to use, depending on whatever you want to write. So this is like almost a ready paper for somebody to write and publish. Dr. Tobe, you have other things?
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. Ultimately, you define the scope and you want to kind of plug in based off on what you're trying to achieve. But I totally agree with you.
Dr. Nehika, I don't know if we answered your question.
No, you definitely answered my question.
Okay.
I did have another question. So how do you, when you're writing a systematic review, how do you avoid plagiarizing? Like, even if, I know like sometimes even like paraphrasing it isn't enough.
Absolutely. Tobe, you want to go first?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think it's ultimately your language, right? And how you're phrasing your sentences, right? Like Dr. Eddie was making an analogy when he was saying, John et al. Said, and we compared this, and in their results, they said, again, as you're writing, you're quoting what is on the other paper. I agree, but I think it's really just your use of words, frankly, right? You want to, as much as possible, stay away from the paper's use of words if you can, right? Or if you cannot, then reference them, right? You can say, Peter et al. In their whatever paper had attributed drug-related liver injury to blah, 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 right? So again, it's a muscle you have to keep flexing, but ultimately it's just your language structure that helps you not plagiarize, right?
Great response, Dr. Tobe. I don't know if that answers it. I'll just add one or two things. So as a beginner writer, it's hard not to plagiarize people. What is plagiarism actually? Plagiarism is taking someone's idea and turning it to your own. So it's hard not to take someone's idea because you're actually going to take the person's paper, what the person wrote in the paper, right? So what do we now do? You cite the person. I believe what you wanted to ask, maybe I'm wrong, is how do you don't sound like the other person? Because often what we see is people just copy and they paste, copy and they paste, right? So I go to this paper, I just copy it and I paste because I lack the technical know-how of how to construct my own phrases, my own research statements, my own discussion points, my own discussion lines, which also, again, piggying back to what Dr. Tobe said, comes with practice, right? It took us a while to begin to sound like ChatGPT. Initially, we were struggling. After writing and then you look at what ChatGPT wrote, you're like, wow, this thing I just wrote is just nonsense, right? Because ChatGPT will come out so excellent. But after repeatedly using these AIs, you notice that you're sounding like them. And if you don't sound like them, that thing that you wrote will not be so, you'll be, would like to use the word ashamed, or you'll be too careful to send it to the next one. Like for me, I'm very careful to send things like, wow, it should sound more professional, because it comes with training and training and training. So first, just know that it's almost impossible not to duplicate another person's idea. However, if you do, cite the person. That's number one. Number two, another way to reduce is don't try to be technical when you're writing. Don't try to sound fanciful, professorial-like when you're writing. Don't try to sound exalted, elevated, bookish. Just be yourself. Just like we are in this meeting, like just say what you found. So in a book written in a research done by Tobechukwu et al. In 2019, he found that metastatic melanomas were more significant in the white people compared to the Black people. He used a systematic approach in his research study. Sounds very childish, right? Just put it like that. That's my words. But I just read today's paper because he has written tons of paper on melanoma, right? I'm just reading it on the screen and I'm just telling you what he found, right? And that's it. Just put it like that. And then I in-text citation, add today, citation 2, and I put it in the reference there. Now, as we advance in medicine, as we begin to grow in life, initially you are doing baby stuff. After a while, you no longer be doing baby stuff, right? Because there are now tools that are available to help you to restructure your statements. For example, Grammarly, for example, you could set Grammarly to make that statement sound academic. That's same in a research done by Toby. So let me share my screen again so you could see what I mean. Again, I share my screen. So again, to PubMed, let's pull up Tobechukwu Kobe because he's written a lot of papers. Tobechukwu Kobe. And I search, and he has, for example, he's part of this group, presentation of colorectal carcinoma and abdominal wall. Toby, this is a paper, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, for example, I'm writing something on colorectal cancer and metastasis, for example. Where does it metastasize to? I don't know that's what was this paper. Colorectal cancer is the third most common malignancy and second most common deadly cancer worldwide. So let's just say I want to pick this statement and cite them. I will come to Grammarly in my baby step. Where's my Grammarly? I can use, okay, let me say Grammarly. And I'm not, again, advertising Grammarly for anybody. Nobody, this is not a commercial for any company. I'm just telling people how to, very simple things. Let's just say, Russian history documents. So I could say in a research by, so I'm making my statement, right? In research by Tobechukwu Kobe et al., they suggested that colorectal carcinoma spreads to the abdominal wall. Right? Okay. So this is like my newbie statement, my baby statement. I could come here and say, okay, what do I even want to do with this statement? I want to make it sound. Okay, let me use Philbots. 1 second, Philbot. So Philbots. Of reason to Grammarly Philbots. All right, so I paste my tests, allow, and then I say, okay, how do I even do this? Okay, because I'm writing an academic paper, I just say paraphrase it to be academic. You see how it transformed my initial baby statement to, in a study conducted by Tobechukwu, it was proposed that colorectal cancer. So if I now take this and I include it in the paper that I'm writing, let's say this paper, we're writing this paper on immune-mediated inflammations in asthma. A team of ours is writing it. We and Dr. It's like 4 of us now working on this paper, for example. I come here, I don't make sure that you don't forget to cite Dr. Tobe, and then you cite him, depending on what kind of citation you want to use, right? Whatever. That becomes an academic statement. So you see how we moved from my simple thought process to an academic, and then I'll add the next one, add the next one, add the next one, keep adding and I keep adding. And I can do this in a paragraph, right? I can do this with paragraphs, I can do this with phrases, I can do this with whatever. The only thing that we ask or researchers ask people to do, or publishers or editors, is in the acknowledgement section or in the disclosure section, don't forget to disclose that there was an AI that was involved, especially and then you tell them what the AI did, rephrasing your statements to become more polished and more scholarly. If you use this approach, you're going to avoid a lot of plagiarism and life is going to be smoother to you. The reason I'm trying to introduce AIs to research writing is that the world is now advancing, right? First, we taught the traditional approach of how to put statements, and we have templates of statement structures in research. If you go to our archive, we've posted templates of how to phrase statement, research blocks of research statement that you can use in your discussion segments, and there are different types. And then if you plug it into paraphrasers like this, you could get a better result. I know it's a long explanation, but we needed to break it down into practicality so that you will be able to do it yourself. Remember that the length of discussion also is determined by you. It could be 1 paragraph, it could be 10 paragraphs, and sometimes it's determined by the journal. Some journals don't want you to submit more than 2,500 words. Some abstracts don't want you to be more than 150 words. So you now look at the various rules that are guiding you and see how you can plug this in. I don't know if we did justice to that question.
Thank you, Dr. Nath. That was an excellent response. It answered a lot of the nitty-gritty questions I had.
Thank you so much. Any other questions so that we can, because it's rare to have an oncologist in our midst. So now that I'm not just an oncologist has written a lot of papers. So if you have any question on these early phases before we now call it a day, please ask us some few questions. I will try to make it as interactive as possible so that, because research in itself is very boring. So we don't want to pick up a topic and then start talking and talking and talking and talking. Perhaps we're not even addressing your needs and your concerns. Dr. Adebite, do you have any question? I see you leaning towards the screen. Dr. Shitu, if you have any question or random thought processes.
I think while we're waiting for somebody to raise a question, I think always keep it at the back of your mind that when you're doing a research is you trying to document something, right? Whenever you're writing on that documentation, you're trying to make an argument, right? Always think in that direction. So whatever you're including into that documentation should be sentences or phrases that are relevant to the arguments that you're making. Always keep at the back of your mind the reason why I started off this paper. I wanted to document, the presentation of colorectal cancer as an abdominal wall flag month. That's the reason why I started off this paper in the first place. So every sentence should be geared in that direction, right? Ultimately, by the time I'm done reading this paper, I would have done good justice making that argument for that presentation, be it a case report, so, whatever the case is. But again, I'll keep saying it's a muscle you have to keep flexing. And if you've done research long enough, you realize that your initial papers compared to your later papers, you would see a lot of growth.
There's a difference.
Yeah, a lot of growth from your first paper to, where you currently are. And it's like that for every single researcher, both guys who've done this long enough.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think we're almost coming to the end of the day. It's 7:55. We're taking the basics of research, the fundamentals of research. Dr. Nii suggested we do a session on different types of how to present a discussion. There's different types of writing techniques. We're going to do that hopefully next session or next 2 sessions, depending on what your objective is focused on, where you want to, how you're tailoring your statements in each of those objectives and going. Yeah, go ahead, ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much for the session. My question is, if I'm not using a kind of systematic review to narrow down or to streamline the number of articles I'm going to use for the case report, how do I know the number of articles I'm going to use? Let's say I just come along with a particular topics in mind that I want to write. So, and I don't want to do a kind of systematic review. So how do I know the number of papers I have to review to either to buttress my point on my own topic or something like that?
I think that question was asked initially, but I'll let Dr. Tobe to re-echo it again. The rest, I think Dr. Nehirika asked that question. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're writing a case report, right?
Yes.
So you're not doing a systematic review, right? So there's no rule to the number of papers that you want to include in your case report, right? It's really because sometimes you may be writing a case report where there are numerous papers. You probably may not be able to include everything into that case report that you're writing, right? So you want to highlight what helps you buttress your points, right? And I guess the point you're making is that I may not know what's relevant in this, terrain and what's not relevant in that terrain. It's okay. Flex that muscle, include what you think is relevant. And there's always potentially going to be somebody who will take a look. I'm an advocate for having somebody who's more experienced take a look, because that way they're able to tell you, hey, I think we should include this into this paper. I think this is not relevant. This is very old. I think the science has changed. There's more information on this. Let's include that, right? But again, ultimately, it falls back to the same things that we're saying. You make that determination, especially for case reports like you're suggesting. If it's a systematic review, then there's a structure to arriving at the number of papers to review, right? But other things like even for a random, if you're writing a proposal for a trial, right, there's really no rule to. I've seen trials where they just included the very relevant papers. They weren't really very exhaustive. As a matter of fact, most of the proposal was actually the author's own language and just a few papers to kind of strengthen the point he was trying to make, right? So I think ultimately it's you, and you have to flex those muscles. You have to train yourself. And if you're one that's training in one direction, for me, I started off a lot of my work was somewhere around cancers, right? And as I've continued to advance, I'm actually even focusing more on genitourinary cancers. So the more you gain experience in the area you're interested in, if that's you, the more you begin to realize what's important and what's not important. But ultimately, it's really just practice, practice, practice.
Great.
Practice. Exactly. Practice. Just make sure that you're addressing your objective. In those types of research that is not specific to systems, like meta-analysis and systematic review, if you address your objective, you've done justice. And keep it very simple. Keep your papers very simple. People have very short attention span. It's almost literally impossible to read 5,000 words. Like, why am I reading 5,000 words for? Like, I don't even get it, right? Keep your papers very simple, 1,500 words. Don't focus on the number of words, but keep it short and sweet. And one of the things that we say is address just one objective per paper. Don't talk about hypertension in black, white, female, east, west, north, south. Like, it's going to be too many things to talk about, and then you're going to be exhausted. So those are part of the reasons why people don't complete their projects. Focus on one objective: colorectal cancer and abdominal wall. That's it. I'm not talking about satellite theory, double hit theory of colorectal. I'm not talking about colorectal cancer with smoking. I'm not going to put in all those things. I'm just focusing on this particular, like, for example, that paper that we gave, just a particular one. Don't go into the temptation of trying to like diversify and be fanciful and funky and bring in so many other things. That's going to just focus on that. If it's 1,000 words you're able to do, get it and submit. The other things that will now make the paper interesting is how you put in diagrams and flow. You see that diagram that we just created? We created it on just based on everything. We put one diagram, we put a table, we put a figure. It looks so scientific in quotes. Dr. Christina, I know you have a question. So just keep it very focused, very short and very brief. You'll be happier reading something that focuses on this thing, compare different. There's a paper that me and Tobechukwu are planning to write, comparing the different efficacies of, different newer model treatment in prostate cancer, right? Even though that those comparisons have been done before, but we're trying to do it for a particular reason. That's it. We're not going to talk about prostate cancer and the theories of prostate cancer and the regulations and the rest. Probably we're going to do that in the introduction, just briefly. We're just comparing what Mr. John did versus what Mr. James did in terms of management of advanced prostate cancer and what is the best outcomes that he got. End of story. If we ended up adding 10 papers, oh, fine. If we ended up adding 3 papers, fine. There might be 1 or 2 landmark papers, for example, papers that are embraced by organizations like American Cancer Association embrace these people's approach. So we want to look at that approach. This approach has been adopted as the guideline approach. We want to look at that approach versus the other traditional approaches. And Dr. Christina.
Yes. My question is like when you're trying to approach a patient to ask for research, how do you approach the patient and go about that? Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, go for it, Dr. Tavi.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. It brings to mind I had a very sad case of a patient who passed on from dog bites, had a dog bite, had capnocytophagia from the dog bites. Very horrible case. Patient passed from DIC and complications from capnocytophagia from the dog bite. And pleasant wife, had a daughter. It was a very difficult scenario to approach the wife for this case report. Again, these people were in their 30s, 40s, young couple, very, very, very uncomfortable space, frankly. But I thought it was an interesting case to document. And so, long, like a while after the, things had settled down and, the patient passed, actually, sadly enough, I sent an email to the wife and I said, hey, this is who I am. And I don't know if you recall, but I was part of the team that had managed your spouse. And I'm truly sorry for the, how things turned out. I was thinking that, this was an interesting case to document because, just putting out the literature would provide us, more information on how to kind of handle, cases like this if we get to see them, sometime again, stuff like that. And I was hoping that we could get your consent to document this case for of your husband and interestingly she responded saying that she's thankful that I reached out, that she's very open to having us document the case, that she thought it would provide her more insight as to what really happened, just give her more information, and I should just keep her updated. And I sent her the consent form. I made a consent form, including all the relevant information that I needed, sent it off to her, and she signed it, sent it back. And, we've had to communicate back and forth a few times. And every time I reach out to her, I feel very sad because I feel like I'm bringing back the memories. Maybe she's trying to put it all behind her. But I also think it's important information to put out there. And we presented it at the National ACP conference that had just passed. So it can be a tough conversation to have if that's what you're headed towards. But ultimately, it's the reasons why you're not just documenting these cases because you want to have authorship of this paper. You want to document it because you think this is relevant and this could help advance the care of subsequent patients that will have this disease process, right? So it's really your presentation. And it's okay if you get a no, right? If your patients say, hey, I don't want it documented, it's fine, right? And just let it go, right? It's ultimately you want to put your patient's interests first, right? But if you do a good job at presenting the case and saying, hey, I think this may be a great case to write up. I remember a lady, I also had an elderly lady. She was very fond of me. I met her and I was like, hey, I think we should document this case. I think it's interesting. She had BALL in her 90s and we were managing her kind of very uniquely, she had CNS involvement and we're giving her intrathecal chemo and she responded to intrathecal chemo. She had systemic response to intrathecal chemo and we thought that was interesting. Anyways, and she told me, she thought I was going to use the science to make money, blah, blah, blah. We kind of laughed it off. I didn't go on to write, I wrote up the case, but I didn't go on to submit or publish the case, right? Because I thought, she wasn't comfortable with me moving forward. So your presentation matters and it's okay if you get a no, right? Oftentimes you will get a yes because people are, interested to help people. Our patients really just want to have that information put out there to help other people. I find that a lot of times, but that's what I would say. I don't know if I've specifically answered your question, but your presentation makes the difference. Help them understand what you're trying to achieve by putting that literature out there and be comfortable getting a no.
I will add that's a very powerful response, Dr. Toby. I'll add some other technicalities behind the scenes. So if you're working in an institution or you're a resident, also try to know your institution approval processes. And these are very easy. There are some institutions that require you to write to the IRB before you could, to write and submit an IRB approval before you could write a case report. Some institutions already have the waiver for case report embedded in their HIPAA form or in their administrative form, right? So try and understand in your school where I'm rotating, how do I get approval to do anything scientific? There's usually a contact person, always, in most institutions, especially in the US and in Canada. That you could just send a simple email. Hey, I saw this case report. It's very interesting. Few things that you have to put in. Remember that your primary goal is a physician. You're trying to, care for them. So you put in your email, the case report you saw, why you think is interesting, and what you want to do with it, right? And then you approach the patient, like Dr. Tobechukwu said. Approach the patient either by the bedside. When do you approach the patient? Usually at the end of the case, because you're not going to approach the patient during crisis. Like this guy came in here for you to help my COPD. I don't even, why are you telling me about writing my case? So the timing really truly matters. Patient is happy. He came in with PCO2 or PO2 or 55 or 54, was intubated or whatever it is, and then is now out in the ward, general ward, breathing on room air or breathing on nasal cannula, doing fine, tolerating 6 steps per minute or O2 of whatever, 98, 97, doing well and is so happy. Then you could all sit down and say, hey, that case was interesting. I've never seen, it's rare to find COPD with asthma and with pneumonia, 3 combinations in one. Do you think, I think it's a good thing to write up so that other physicians and other young physicians could, learn how to manage it. Is this something you're interested in? They say yes. If they say no, Dr. Toby already said, be okay for people to say no in this life. And people should be comfortable with no's. It's something that we're going to talk about maybe one of these days. Like, you should be comfortable with, you chat me up and I say, no, I don't want to do this for you. It's okay. I'm an adult. You're an adult. It's fine. Don't let the thought process that this person is going to tell you no deter you from reaching out to the person, right? It says, okay, no, fine, you move on with your work. So, talk to the person. Technicalities, always document, because this is now, the advanced world where someone can sue you for using his information for nothing, right? But probably tomorrow you're going to be the chief oncologist in Johns Hopkins, and then they'll say that this guy is so rich, and then they'll come after you for something you did like 30 years ago. So I always emphasize consent, and document. Make sure that patient signs, you have a trace, put it in the patient's chart, get an approval, keep it where in the next 20 years you can see. That's why we archive most of all these things that we do, right? So that if somebody comes next 3 years, we'll say, hey, yeah, this is the archives of what we did. And in research has a timeline, what they call, I think it's 20 years to keep records. Record timelines about 20 years or 15 years, depending on your institution guideline, right? So, and then you now get a consent. Some institutions have already preformed consent forms. Some institutions don't have. If your institution doesn't have, get one, get it approved. We have templates of consent form in our forum. to make things easy and get it done. So these are part of the technicalities that I want to add in addition to what he has said. I think we've come to the end of today's conversation. There are going to be, little talks here and there, but cumulatively, they're going to build your confidence in research. Thank you, Dr. Tobechukwu Okobi, for being our guest today and weighing in your expertise on these topics that are hindering people from doing their own research. My name remains Dr. Kobe Edwards. We're going to see you again next week. Officially, we're going to stop the recording, and then we'll just have a